This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Well, I hope you're ready, because you're doing all kinds of crazy work that you shouldn't be doing. And as I always like to say, if you don't have a virtual assistant, then you are the virtual assistant. To help us with this, I have the awesome and amazing Melissa Smith. Melissa, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, David.
So tell us a little bit about your own virtual assistant adventures. And then we definitely have to hear, because you actually founded the Association of Virtual Assistants. And so what it takes to found an association of your colleagues and peers. But first, tell us a little bit about your professional journey that brought you to the VA world.
Yeah, it's not so far-fetched. I was in the EA world. So I was an executive assistant for over 15 years. Before I started as a virtual assistant, my background was as an EA. My mom was an EA. I went to secretary school. That's just what I knew I was going to do. But then life showed up. My husband passed away suddenly. And all of a sudden, all these different moves and things came into play. I needed a different type of lifestyle. I needed a different type of working environment. But at the same time, I had no idea what that was. And it was actually our second cross-country move, where I was moving back from California to Georgia, and I went to my boss to give my 2-week notice, and he said, "We don't want to lose you. How can we keep you?" And I said, "Well, I could do most of what I do virtually. I don't have to be here in the office." And he said, "Okay, let's do that." So I became the first remote employee that company ever had. And then a few weeks later, contracts were sent out for the next year. And I thought, I wonder if I could do this for myself. Maybe this is my time. And I had no business plan, no idea what I was doing. I completely and naively jumped into it, but it felt right. And so I started my own virtual assistant company, because I just thought, this is what I do. I can do this virtually. I didn't know how when I first started, but I quickly learned what it was. And that's how I started my virtual assistant business.
Melissa, it's so funny that you say that, because I say this about my entrepreneurial beginnings also. I say I made every mistake in the book. I made the good ones twice. I had no idea what I was doing, totally clueless, hit every brick wall, hit every dead end. So that same origin story, it's like, oh my God, sign me up. Me too, me too, me too. We're going to jump ahead, and we're going to come back to some other things later. This whole concept that I started with about if you don't have a VA, you are the VA. I'm going to venture to say 90% of the folks listening to us right now are consultants, trainers, coaches, speakers. They're futzing around with their website. They're doing their tags in Infusionsoft and ActiveCampaign. They're trying to update their WordPress plugins. Let's be kind. And let's say this is not the best and highest use of their time. But at the same time, they're saying, well, I don't know where to find someone that can do all of these different things. So help me bust this myth, or help set us straight. Are we hiring specialized VAs? Are we hiring general purpose VAs? Could a VA do graphic design and manage the website, and help me write my newsletter and update my online course portal, or should I be looking for a specialized team of VAs to really niche into these various job functions that I have for them?
That's a really great question. And it really starts with, what is going to be most impactful for me right now? If you get on this tangent of all the things that a VA could possibly do, and it's quite extensive, you'll overwhelm yourself, and most likely you'll overwhelm yourself into inaction versus taking action. If you were to start and say, if I had one thing that I would just love to hand off to my virtual assistant, if I had 1 hour in the day, I could give something to somebody else and have that hour back to write or to reach out or to do nothing, to research, to have my own professional development. What would that be? And then start from there. It's highly unlikely that someone starts out with a VA over 10 hours a week. It's highly unusual. The average person only uses a VA 5 to 10 hours a day, 10 being on the high side. Now, there are times where many people will say, oh, but I have these spikes in my business. And that's why they don't hire, right? Because they're thinking, well, it only comes every quarter. It only comes twice a year. But that's every quarter that you go through this huge cycle of almost to burnout. And then you go up and down and it's not level. You can't run a business that way. So I say start small, think about that. And now you already have a person when those cycles come up. Now, when we're talking about the work that the VA does, I do run into individuals mostly in the months of November through January, and they do need to hire a team because they have a podcast that they're running. They have a newsletter that has to go out. They have a launch for their online course that's coming up. And they've waited so long to hire anyone that by the time that they do, they have to hire a team. Now, I want to also bust the myth that hiring a team is more expensive than hiring a single virtual assistant. That's not the case. In fact, the only main difference is that when you hire a team, you usually have to commit to certain hours a month, maybe 20 hours a month. And if you need a team, that 20 hours, I mean, that's basically just 5 hours a week. Anyone can do that, right? But if not, then chances are what you need is a specialized virtual assistant and someone who does graphic design, someone who is going to be on certain websites and online courses. Those are probably going to be a few things that they do. That virtual assistant is probably one person. But if you need more of a generalist or an EVA or maybe someone in launch support or marketing, ClickFunnels, it really just depends. But you can get super specific. You can find someone who considers themselves a jack or Jill of all trades. But most people need one thing to start unless they've passed the point. And then at that point, they actually usually need a team to run everything from digital marketing to email calendaring to reaching out to podcasts, to pitching, to booking social media kits. I mean, you name it. They've just been doing it for way too long on their own.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is like when someone says, well, when should I pull the trigger? Like, when should I hire a VA? In my experience, all of our folks, entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, they wait too late. They eventually hire someone, and we'll talk about the hiring process and the matchmaking process in a second. And they say, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this sooner? This is awesome. I didn't know it would be this great. Rarely, unless you make a hiring mistake, which again, we'll talk about in a second, rarely does someone go, I hired this person. They took all this work off my plate. Boy, I'm really bummed out now. This is terrible. I've got way too much free time. I've got way too much margin in my day now. Said no client ever.
Right.
So let's talk about hiring done wrong. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly, and then we'll talk about the good. I've made this mistake. I've gone onto these websites. I've gone onto Elance. I've gone to the local college and university. Hey, I'm looking for an intern, right? It's like, I really need a professional VA, but I think, I'll just get an intern because an intern's going to work for free, or an intern's going to work for like $5 an hour, $10 an hour. One time I was blessed and I had a fantastic, fabulous intern. She actually approached us, and she was a marketing student at a local university, and she was just sharp as a tack, wonderful. For that one episode, I can show you 5 terrible hiring mistakes that we made early on, mishiring, not knowing what we didn't know about the matchmaking process, about these various skills, the kind of the portfolio strategy that you just described. Where do most entrepreneurs go wrong before they come to you, Melissa? And what are some of the horror stories that you've heard?
People just don't do their due diligence. It's just that simple. We're accustomed to when we maybe worked for a company, or we understand what it's like if you're going to be an employee and going through the hiring process. But most people just think they're an excellent judge of character, and so that they don't have to do their due diligence. And so they may say, oh, well, this person, they work for my friend. I've known that person for 20 years. And so if he recommends her or she recommends her, then of course it must be, great. But having someone else work for someone else, that doesn't mean that you all are going to work together the same way. So you have to do your due diligence. It starts with communication strategy. That is the basis for it. So the communication strategy is for the client. It has to be in your manner, medium, your tone, your verbiage. If you like to talk on the phone and your VA does not, I don't care how great this person is, it's not going to work. If you like to communicate in Slack and they like to text, that's not going to work. They have a ticketing system and you have to create yet another password and that just drives you insane. Not going to work. So that's the very first thing. It's the most basic. The second thing is, are you this VA's ideal client? Now, this is where it goes wrong in the referrals most often, because this VA and that client may have been working together for, 5 years, 10 years, but that may be the last client like that VA serves. But because they're such a long-term client, they don't want to let their client down. They don't want to refuse a referral. They don't really know how to say, you know what, I don't really work with people like you anymore. Companies like you are in that industry. I've switched my focus. So look at their social media profiles, their website. What are they putting out? Do you see yourself in any of that copy, in that writing, in these descriptions? If you don't see yourself, then that's probably not the right person. You're probably not their ideal. And then when you're going through the interview process, one interview does not make the best candidate. No, there's not a job out there where someone looks at one person and says, this is it. This is it, right? It's not like your dream home. It's someone who's going to be working with you. You have to do more than one interview before you make the hire. You have to ask for references, and you actually have to conduct reference checks. You can't skip that process. Another step, I also have background checks done for extra peace of mind as well. But, just having those steps right there, you'll do so much more and you'll learn so much more. And in fact, you'll also solidify your decision, because so many people hire and then they're like, oh, did I do that right? Or I'm not sure. Or, oh, I think something's gone wrong here. I should have known this before. And these are things that may have come up when you're conducting those reference checks. I was just doing reference checks today and someone said, she's so great. She's such an awesome VA. But make sure if the person is someone who's going to just be shouting out ideas left and right, that they tell her, not everything that I say is an action item. It might just be an idea, because she's so fast. She will take your quote unquote idea and run with it like it's an action item. And you're like, oh, I totally forgot about that. I don't want to do that anymore.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Let's talk about this magic service. I'm now calling this the magic service, the PVA, the matchmaking service that you step in, you work with the client, and you say, let me take all of this hiring, sorting, filtering, vetting, validating, reference checking off your plate. You have a 98% success rate matching clients with a great VA. How did that idea occur to you? And then talk about the early days of getting that going and what some of the early wins were.
So, back in the early days, I would talk about like not doing anything right. So when I say that I struggled when I first started, it was because I'm not naturally entrepreneurial. It's something I had to learn over time. So naturally entrepreneurial to me means you follow the money trail. Like you understand like where money is, where value is. And I was matching people, I can't even call them clients. I was matching people that I had met through networking events with virtual assistants for like a year before I thought, I wonder if someone would pay me to do this. So I was doing all this networking, meeting all these people, and I was educating them on virtual assistants and what we do and how we could help. And at the end of the conversation, they would say, great, can I hire you? And I would say no. And they'd look at me like I was crazy. And I said, well, I'm just not that type of virtual assistant. And they would say, well, where does one find such a person? And I thought, gosh, I know tons of people. That's how I got my start. And I was, like I said, I was doing that for a year for free. And then one day I just had this light bulb moment. And I thought, I wonder if someone would pay me to do this. So I remember my first client, and he actually was someone that I could work with. But I noticed in the conversation, I was losing him. And something inside me just kind of sparked. I'm like, no, I'm not going to lose this potential client. I got this. And then I asked a question that I had never asked other people before, because he was telling me all the things he needed to do in his business, right? He needed this, he needed that. I need to exercise more. I need to sleep more. Like none of those things were really exciting though. So I asked him a question and I said, well, what have you wanted to implement in your business, but you haven't? And he said, oh my gosh, if I could just hire a virtual assistant to clean up my CRM, we'll send out 4 quarterly newsletters a year. If I got one new client from each quarterly newsletter, I could probably double my business because he was in this like really niche field. And I said, great. So if I could find you the right virtual assistant to do that, he's like, oh, I'd pay for that. I'd absolutely pay for that. That was my first client. That was my first win. And he went on to be a repeat client. And I had raised my prices 3 times by the time he hired me again. And so I said, I have to tell you though, I'm happy to do this for you again, but I've tripled my prices. And he said, it's worth it. Let's go ahead and do it. And my clients would say, I don't have the time to get it right and I can't afford to get it wrong. That's who hires me.
Wow. 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 That's fantastic. So now let's put that all on steroids. And that wasn't enough that you built this amazing kind of premier matchmaking service. You then decide, you know what? This industry does not have a professional trade association. I'm looking around. I'm not seeing anything. I'm going to start one. So tell us about the AVA and how that has blossomed into something pretty awesome.
Well, there actually were associations, but I just didn't identify with them. They weren't giving me what I needed, right? And my mom, like I said, she was an assistant and she was part of IWAP, which is the International Association of Administrative Professionals. She was the Georgia chapter president, and they really had a way of doing things, and they were organized and they were making things happen. They were, passing bills. They had this really strong community where they could go to one another. And that's the part that I was missing within the community. So after I wrote my first book, I had all these VAs reaching out to me, and they were asking me for the same thing. And they wanted, where do I find this resource? What do I do when this happens? What happens when a client tells you this? There's all these different ways of doing it. So I thought, I have to create this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it. And I have this note on my vision board because I was reading one of Dan Pink's books, and he said, write yourself a rejection letter. Whatever you want to do right now, just write yourself a rejection letter and then keep at it. So it's dated March 14th, 2016. And March 17th, 2019, the AVA launched. And I was able to launch it with some partners who are really great because it is an association. It's done an online course to promote myself. There's a bunch of different VAs in the industry. There's a lot of different ways to do things. We needed to create some industry standards though. So we did that. First and foremost, we started with pricing. Then we did the VA State of the Industry report. But there's also so many VAs who can chat in real time from around the world. When someone has a question, they're just starting, or maybe they're not just starting. Maybe they have been doing this for 10 years and now they want to do more speaking. They want to do more consulting. They want to branch out. They want to create a community. Like, where can you go from here? Just like in any other profession. And so we wanted that. But because we're virtual assistants, we always have to keep the client in mind. So how can we do all these things that actually benefit the client? So in everything that we do, we're always thinking, how does this benefit the client? What information can we share with the client from this? And then we also gave clients the option to join as client members so they can hire a VA, or if they don't want to become a member, they can still post a job and hire the right VA that way.
Now, tell us a little bit about, because this is part art and part science, isn't it? This matchmaking.
Oh, I love it. I'm such a sucker for everything that says art and science.
So let's dig into that, because there are objective and subjective things that you look at. And you look at, obviously, the client and their personality, their wants, their needs, their expectations. And then you look at your field of VA candidates. How does that work, or how have you developed that sixth sense to really make the matches so effective to hit that 98% success rate?
It started when I was an assistant. So I was always working for someone who was overhiring. So I started that and I became part of every hiring board. And I really enjoyed it. I've never had a job that I didn't love. So for me, it just seems unreasonable that you would want to hire a person who is not going to love their job. And then I used to change jobs quite often, like way before millennials made it common. Like, I was changing jobs because I would get bored. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be at a job that I'm bored at. That's awful. So I really understood that. So I think that was like the first key to really understanding that, and understanding, like, it's not just that someone can do the job, but are they going to love it? That's a different level of experience and service and skill set that you're getting when someone really loves what they do. Well, then as an entrepreneur and as an assistant, it really played to my middle child person inside me that sees both sides of the coin. What does this person want? What does this person need? What would make this person happy? What kind of experience would this person get? And really uncovering that. And because I was an assistant and because I was now a virtual assistant, I understood what good looks like. It like takes one to know one. But I also really could understand and set proper expectations on the client side, whether that be like reeling them in and saying, yeah, I don't know if that's really where you want to go yet. Or being able to say, like, you need to ask for what you want. You need to ask for what you want. You're saying one thing, but that's really not what you want. Right. And being able to have those really candid conversations and pull it out. But for me, it really is about, do you love what you're doing? And I know like that's, become cliche, but I just wouldn't want anyone to wake up and think, oh, I have to do this today. That's just a horrible way to live, in my opinion. Right. So that's really where it started. And then I just started really honing those skills over the years and really asking the question behind the question. I just did another consultation today, and it's my 5th one in a row now where someone said, that was like a therapy session. And what that tells me is I've gotten better at listening. And, that consultation, so many people think it's about just, asking the questions and, having this real transactional moment. But for me, mastering the consultation is really about that silence and forcing the client to answer the question that maybe they've never even given themselves the opportunity to answer. And then I do the same thing with the VA. I'm like, tell me why this person is your ideal. Tell me why you are uniquely qualified to work with this individual. Tell me what you bring to the table. I really go deep in there. Like, tell me about your personal self. Like, what do you do when you're not working? How have you maintained your own boundaries? How do you know how to work with a client who has never worked with the VA before? And most importantly, the true measure of any true assistant, whether human or AI, is the ability to anticipate your needs. So if you don't have someone who's anticipating your needs and you have to delegate, you are actually working more than you should be. Delegating is work.
Yes. I want to dig into that because that is a whole separate topic in and of itself. Before we get to delegating, and people are not going to be able to see this because it's, of course, an audio podcast, but this is the problem. I got to hang on. It's like, Melissa, I'm hanging on to every task. I'm afraid to let go. It's like, someone can manage my inbox. No. Only I can manage my inbox. Someone can write some email copy. No, I have to write the email copy. How do we train the client to let go? And, I think the ideal VA, in my experience, because I've hired the good, the bad, the ugly, and now we have a fantastic, amazing team. We have 3 amazing folks on our team that are some sort of VA type of role. I can only tell you, getting the right people makes galactic difference. A good VA, to what you're saying, anticipates the needs and proactively will remove things from your plate. So I remember this is 2015, 2016. Sam, who's an amazing, started out as a VA and is now really our director of operations and does all kinds of things, way, way higher level than just the entry-level VA. She says, David, I want you to show me how to do what you just, talked about. Make a video, and then that is the last time that you ever get to touch that thing. Because she would watch me work. She would say, okay, I kind of see what's going on here. Can you shoot me like a 2-minute, 3-minute video of kind of how you do that? And now it's mine, right? But this was what I call intelligent grunt work. And there's a huge difference between a business owner or an entrepreneur doing things that are truly his or her highest and best use, that are truly undelegatable, versus processing routine email. Processing routine email is not our best and highest use. A good VA, for example, would learn what the rules are. And like you said, either a human or AI, okay, I got it. It's pattern recognition. Here's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be successful 99.5% of the time. The start of that is the entrepreneur letting go and being willing and being open to having that dialogue and understanding that not only are they not the best person to do it, other people can often be better at those tasks, which I have found to be true 100% of the time. How do you train the entrepreneur to let go?
I don't train them. I don't convince anybody. I'm happy to provide education, but sadly, some people just have to hit rock bottom. One of our amazing members of the ABA, David Rocky, has a virtual assistant service, SOS, and he came up with this lifesaver for it, right? And he said, it's just like when someone is like drowning and you're going to go rescue them. Like you can't go rescue them as why they're like kicking and screaming and arms waving all over the place. Like you have to wait till they just decide to give up and then you can go in and rescue them. But there's nothing that you can do as long as they're like fighting you 100% of the way. But when I have clients who say, I know I need to do this, but I'm afraid. And I said, great, that I can work with. If you are afraid, let's take something that you're not afraid of. Like if you're afraid of someone handling your emails, don't start there.
Yeah.
Don't start there. There's 100 other things that we can think of that someone else can do to start the process and work with you. But, unless you want to feel overwhelmed forever, unless you want to feel like you're chained to your desk, unless you want to feel all these other things, like keep doing what you're doing. I'm not here to convince you of anything. You have to have 100% complete buy-in in order for this to work. But if you have fear of someone taking over your email and, who knows what you're afraid of, don't start there. Start somewhere else.
Yeah.
Do something. But, if people wanted to hear horror stories of what happens when someone gets sick or something's out or, you have all these things backed up and, heaven forbid you get another client and that other client is actually like the bane of your existence. You're turning away business. Freedom is the new wealth. And I have clients who are, making millions and yet cannot go on vacation. They're erratic. I can see it in their email times and I can see it in the other things that they're doing. Frankly, I'm not making millions, but I have a much better lifestyle.
Yeah.
I don't feel the kind of stress that they do. So, it really comes down to what do you want?
Right. Didn't I send you the email invitation to this podcast like at 3:47 a.m.? I think I might have.
I don't know. I follow you. So I thought that this was like one of your emails that I was getting. And I looked at it, I'm like, hey, wait, that's me. Like,
right. Like, is he sending all of his entire email database? Hey, Melissa, I'd love to interview on my podcast. It's like, that'd be a weird email message to send out to his whole list. Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. But I will tell you that this onboarding process, I think, is magic because you coming alongside both the VA and the entrepreneur to make sure that goes smoothly, critically important. How did you come up with that onboarding process? Give us an idea of what to expect and what happens during that 12-week onboarding period. And when do you feel it's safe to say, okay, match made in heaven, I'm out, have fun, kids, call me if you need anything.
Typically, if it's not going to work out with your VA, it's going to happen in the first 2 weeks. I offer a 3-month guarantee, but that's really just for peace of mind. It's most likely to happen in the first 2 weeks. Something's, going to go wrong there. It's really quick because that's the time you're working most closely together. So my onboarding process really came to me from my clients. I didn't always have one. And my clients would say, it would be great if you created something that says how I'd work with this person. And I thought, okay, I can do that. So I created this onboarding process. And when I first gave it to the clients, they thought, well, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. And I said, I can understand that, but this is really what you need. Your VA is going to have processes and procedures, because I only work with professionals, to get all these other things out of you and know how to properly exchange information and have everything secure. And they're going to have it based on whatever your needs are. That's going to be different for every client. However, what's the same for every client is that unmet expectations are the root of all disappointments. So let's start out with our expectations and let's meet those expectations. So where do you want to be in 12 weeks? What's going to happen if you're not there? What would you consider a failure? What is the thing that you expect that is most likely to derail you? Like, these are things your VA needs to know. And then whether it be like 2 weeks or 12 weeks, you have this roadmap to what a good onboarding process is, and it's your success. And again, because I don't believe in giving clients work, there's just a few things that they fill out and then they give it to their VA. And now it's their VA's job to manage that process and onboard them in that first 12 weeks. And in many times it can be done sooner. Sometimes they'll have their 12-week expectation met in 8 weeks. But without that, before they would get really gung-ho often and say, gosh, we've been working together so great, but we're not getting a lot done. I said, really? Tell me about that. Well, they would get so excited that their VA could do so many different things that the client themselves lost track and lost sight of what their 12-week goal was. Like the VA didn't really understand that. So now the VA could come back and say, well, if I do that, that's going to delay this other project. Is that really what you want to do? And the client will say, oh, no. What if it's going to derail the other project? Let's put this on the calendar for next quarter, or let's talk about it after we meet this. And so it's really about meeting those expectations, even when you're like, oh my gosh, I could have this VA do so much.
Right. Well, it's an outsourced version of shiny object syndrome,
Yes.
right? Where it's not part of your strategic plan. It's not what you're currently doing right now, but suddenly you're high on life and you're like, oh, I have a VA. I could set this VA on like being on Instagram all day long. It's like, well, are you on Instagram all day long? No. Are your clients on Instagram? No. Do you have a business reason for being on Instagram all day long? No. But I have a VA. She can be on Instagram. It is so dangerous because you start to taste that freedom. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, every task looks like a good task. Every platform looks like a good platform. And you've totally veered off course of your 90-day goal.
Right. Before people hire a VA, they usually have time debt, right? They're taking time from other things and doing, different things that they weren't supposed to be at that time, whether it's sleep or whether it's working or it's writing or it's exercising, whatever it is, they have time debt. Well, just like you have a money budget, so if you get more money in, you know where that money is going, you have to have a time budget so that when now that hour is now freed up in your day, what are you going to do with that hour? Yeah. What are you going to do with that time? If you have all these other things that you're not doing, how are you really going to spend that time now? And when clients don't understand that, that's when they go off. And I would say, maybe it's more Clubhouse or TikTok now that clients are spending their time on. Right. And we don't know if that's a good use of their time yet.
Exactly. Well, Melissa Smith, I've got 2 closing questions for you. The final question is going to be, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Melissa Smith brilliance? But before we get to that, the second to last question, if people were to take one overall idea, one big picture concept from our conversation today about finding a VA, matching with a VA, onboarding a VA, working with a VA as a major lifestyle and time freedom improvement, what do you hope that one key concept would be?
That it's never too early to start working with a VA. It's never too early. When people ask me, when's the perfect time to hire a VA? It's always before you need one. It's always before you need it. It's just like insurance. You need it before you need it.
Amen. Could not agree more. Now, where can people go to connect with more Melissa Smith brilliance? Website, social media. We're going to put all these links right under this episode at thespeakingshow.com. But Melissa, where do you want to send people for some cool resources and things to look at?
So you can visit my website, thepva.com. You can visit associationofvas.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Melissa Smith, the PVA. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, but I don't really hang out there. And of course, my mission is to make sure that every person who wants to hire a VA has the opportunity to do so. And not just any VA, but the right VA. And so I have a book, but I also have a free complimentary workbook that walks you through my entire process, from identifying why you're going to hire this person all the way to reviewing contracts and proposals. So I leave nothing out. I include the background service that I use, reference questions, you name it. It's all in there. There's no excuse not to hire the right VA.
Beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. We have to have you back because this is such an important topic. Thank you for sharing your brilliance with us today.
My pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.